Welcome, everybody. I'm Walter Isaacson of the Aspen Institute. Thank you all for coming. This is a very important event we have today because I do think that the notion of training people for jobs and skills to the workplace is the most important thing we're going to embark on in the next few years to try to get this to be a nation again of economic opportunity where everybody gets a decent shot. At the Institute, we've been doing that a lot with Skills for America's Future, one of our programs, our Workforce Strategy Initiative, all of our economic opportunity programs. We have a community strategy group, and with Melody Barnes, who helped put this together, she runs our Forum for Community Solutions. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Peter Scheer, who's representing JPMorgan, and we'll get us started. Thank you for coming.
Walter, thank you, and thank you. Let me just add my thanks to the Aspen Institute for hosting us here today. Aspen, Walter, as you mentioned, has been a very important partner in pulling all this together. We look forward to working with you and your colleagues over the months and years ahead. I also want to acknowledge Strobe Talbot, president of the Brookings Institution, who's here today, another great partner of ours. Thank you, Strobe, for being here. We're very excited to be here at Aspen to launch New Skills at Work, which we believe is an unprecedented 5-year, $250 million initiative to help close the skills gap here in the United States and in markets around the world. The urgency of this issue is something that we hear about everywhere we do business, and it's something that we hear from our clients, we hear from community leaders, we hear from nonprofits. This paradox in the United States, for example, 4 million jobs are not filled, while 11 million Americans are unemployed. In Europe, there are another 2 million unfilled jobs. And this initiative to help close the skills gap, and we hope to help, in doing so, to help reduce unemployment, to help drive more broadly shared prosperity, represents a significant realignment of JPMorgan's philanthropic strategy. Our focus over the next 5 years, as Jamie Dimon said just yesterday, will be how do you grow the economy, how do you create more jobs? And what's clear to us is that workforce development is essential to economic development. So through New Skills to Work, this new initiative, through our Global Cities Initiative with the Brookings Institution, through our efforts to support the development of small businesses and more empowered consumers, we're going to use our resources, we're going to use our expertise, our relationships, and our global perspective to support the economic growth and the success of our communities. In terms of this initiative, let me just say a couple quick things. This will be not just a comprehensive, but a demand-driven approach. First, we will provide expertise and data to analyze the challenge that communities face and that sectors face in filling their skills needs and develop actionable strategies. We hear this everywhere we go, that there's a lack of real data about the needs in particular communities. Second, working with some of the great partners who are with us here today and others, we're going to provide the resources and financial support for the development programs which actually reflect the data and the challenges in those communities. Third, we're going to use our ability to convene leaders. This is another thing we hear, that people aren't talking to each other. And so we want to make sure that both the public and the nonprofit sectors, the people doing the training and the people doing the hiring, are actually talking to one another about the real needs in the workplace, sharing best practices, and identifying the programs that are training people for the jobs that are actually needed in those communities. And finally, let me just say, because of the critical importance of this issue to our firm, to so many of our clients and communities, we have a leadership team that I think speaks for itself. Jamie Dimon, our chairman and CEO, will personally chair this initiative. Melody Barnes, who you'll be hearing from soon, and I think most of you know, is one of the great leaders and thinkers about this challenge, will be the co-chair of the initiative. And one of our new colleagues, Chauncey Lennon, who recently joined us a few weeks ago from the Ford Foundation, where he's been a real leader in workforce development, and he will run New Skills at Work. Taken together, our hope is that this initiative, the leadership team, and the partners who are here today will make a meaningful difference for job seekers, for businesses, and for local economies in the United States and in markets around the world. It's a very exciting opportunity, and I think there's no better way to launch it than here at Aspen with this very distinguished panel. Before I turn the program back over to Walter, we have a very quick video which we're going to share, which explains what this is about, and then we're going to turn the podium over to J.D. Hoy. So can we run the video?
Over the past 5 years, the American economy has added about 5 million net new jobs. Yet over 11 million Americans remain unemployed. The same is true in countries around the world. Unfilled jobs, but stubbornly high unemployment. One big reason for this is something called the skills gap. What's the skills gap? Here's an example. Meet Sally. Sally owns a company that manufactures widgets. New technologies make Sally more competitive than ever. But running those advanced machines, it requires specific skills. Sally needs to hire, but has trouble finding qualified applicants. Now, meet Jack. Jack is a high school graduate looking for work in Localville. He sees Sally's help wanted ad, but he doesn't even apply for the position. He knows he's not qualified. Okay, now the distance between Sally and Jack, that's the skills gap. And right now, as many as 4 million jobs in America alone are unfilled because of it. To help close the skills gap and create more broadly shared prosperity in America and around the world, we need a real-time understanding of the skills needed for open jobs at the local level and training programs that prepare eager workers for those opportunities. That's why JPMorgan Chase has launched New Skills at Work, a landmark 5-year, $250 million global initiative to bridge the skills gap. New Skills at Work starts with local research to understand the skills gap in key cities in the U.S. and around the world. Then we incorporate industry intelligence from local employers to further understand what skills are needed in high-growth sectors. Out of this data, gap reports are produced to inform our efforts. New Skills at Work then teams up with leading nonprofit organizations, providing them with tens of millions of dollars each year to support their proven job skills training programs. Over time, participating cities will share their experiences so they can learn from each other about the best ways to close the skills gap. By focusing on good data, a clear picture of the credentials employers are looking for, and accountability for results, New Skills at Work will help bridge the gap between Sally and Jack and serve as a model for workers, businesses, and economies around the world. To find out more, visit us at newskillsatwork.com.
So I want to turn over this podium to J.D. Hoy, who I think many of you know, the president of the National Academy Foundation, really one of the great leaders in her work to reform how young people are engaged in learning and how they are positioned to pursue meaningful careers. So again, thank you all for being here, and please welcome J.D. Hoy.
Thanks, Peter. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm always reminded when I see great videos like that at the end of the day, we have to realize that every 26 seconds, one of our high school students drops out in this country. This initiative is an opportunity to stop that hemorrhaging. This is a moment to actually underscore what we've known for a long time, which is partnerships between education, nonprofits, governments, and business is the solution. But we need to do it together, and we need to do it based on real data. Not what we heard last week or what is a global presentation of information, but what's real locally on the ground. People get confused when they look at large data and they don't know what it means to their backyard. This is a moment, an opportunity with great leadership and a great investment to say we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to look at real data, real gaps, tied to real emerging markets and real jobs, and get that information to those who need it, who need to take those jobs in the future. This is a powerful initiative. It's an investment tied clearly to partnerships and an opportunity for finally to take the craziness out of the marketplace that young people look at every day and say, how does that relate to me? And actually suggest that the relationship between industry, our communities, our schools, and our businesses is about making it work for the individual to grow an economy, a set of communities, and to once again become competitive internationally. So I represent a group of people who have been at this work for a long time. It's not just my organization, but I have to tell you, I am so proud that there's a company who's willing to invest in proven practice instead of the new shiny thing. Going after proven track records with research and amplifying that and scaling that is what we have been missing. So it's a pleasure to join you.
Thank you. Great. That was really good. Thank you. Let me invite Mayor Emanuel and Melody Barnes and Jamie Dimon. Thank you. Thank you. Before we start, Jamie, let me hit you with a couple of news questions, if I may. What do you make of the budget deal and what that will do for the economy?
I sent an email to Patty Murray and Paul Ryan yesterday, basically saying thank you, thank you, thank you, and may the Lord bless them, because the country's getting stronger every single day, and not shooting ourselves in the foot is a very good thing not to do. If we just keep on doing this, collaborating, keep on doing some smart things, I think America can start to really grow rapidly. That's what we all want. That'd be a fabulous outcome.
And you think this might lead to more of that?
I think it's one step in the right direction as opposed to into the precipice.
And what about immigration, which is the other big issue? How important is that to the economy?
Again, I think it's critical. I saw a bunch of senators give the very detailed plan what they were doing immigration, very well thought through about migrant workers and temporary workers and people who've actually been here and their green cards expired. It's the right thing to do morally. But if you talk about economically, a lot of economists will tell you that if we did pass that bill, it'll increase the growth in America by 0.5 to 1% a year for 10 years. Okay, that will eliminate so many issues and problems. It would create jobs. It would be the best thing possible, and it's morally right. So I think we should do everything we can and call your congressmen, senators, tell them you really want this thing to get done.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Emanuel, thank you for being here. What's driving the skills gap, do you think?
Well, what I think is driving it is people are coming out of an education system that wasn't preparing them for the job opportunities. So what we did in the city of Chicago is, and just give you a size of the scope of the challenge, we have about, like this video, 100,000 jobs open in the Chicago area and about a 9%, like other urban areas, unemployment. And we have 7 community colleges. So I aligned each community college up with an industry that was a growth industry in our area. Healthcare, transportation, distribution, logistics, advanced manufacturing, professional services, IT, convention and hospitality. I then said to the industry, do the curriculum, do the training of the teachers. Teachers are on a paid for performance basis, which I'll get back to later, and drive the school so it's specifically focused on that sector. So give you an example, Malcolm X is all healthcare. They're right near the West Side Medical Center, where Rush Presbyterian Hospital is, Cook County Stroger Hospital is. So Rush Presbyterian Hospital, Northwestern Hospital, Abbott, Baxter, Walgreens, Allscripts, going on the list, all do the curriculum, all do the training for home health care, pharmacy, nursing, healthcare IT, and what we are finally doing, from my perspective, is the community colleges in our area are basically the last step of a remedial education, the first step on the way to a job. And that job is a middle-class paying job. And we give people certificates so they can get in and out of the system. Sometimes the 2 years is too long, given they have to work. So that's what we've identified our best growth job areas or sectors, and then aligned our educational facilities with those sectors.
And you call that a college to workforce program?
College to career.
College to career program.
Yeah.
And I think Penny Pritzker, who started the Skills for Workplace program we have here at the Aspen Institute, worked with you on developing that?
Oh, she worked with us on that, and then Skills for Chicago combines, is another version of that, and actually Glenn Tilton, Vice Chairman of JPMorgan, has now replaced Penny as the chair of that. But it's focusing on, I'll give you this one anecdote. I was on the train, and a young man had just left Harold Washington Community College. He's getting his business administration degree. And he's going to work on the train to Target, where he does inventory. And I was talking to him, and I realized, he's working full-time, he's going to school full-time, he's doing everything you would ask responsibly. And can I say in good conscience that I think what's going on at Harold Washington is preparing him for all the sacrifices and challenges he's meeting head-on by himself. I mean, he's on a train, he's going to work, just left school. And I couldn't in good conscience say when he goes, when he goes to apply for a job and sits across the desk from JPMorgan, that says Harold Washington is going to open the door, get the interview, in the way that Sarah Lawrence or Northwestern meant for me or any of us. And if JPMorgan, which they are, is involved in developing the professional services and business administration at Harold Washington, the HR person, when they interview him, knows that they had something to do with the curriculum development. And I've actually made his education and his career all that more successful. And that's what we're doing in Chicago. And this is essential. I can't get from here to there without this. And I want to say JPMorgan has been great to do this. because the federal and state governments are pulling back, and this is an essential type of resources to move our metropolitan economies forward.
Melody, thanks for all the work you're doing here at the Aspen Institute on this issue and bringing this together. Tell me what you think of the driving causes of this gap and what can be done about it.
Sure. Well, as Rahm said, and as we saw in the video, we have a growing global workforce, but at the same time, we don't have people that have the required skills to fill the jobs. And particularly in the American society, we're seeing a shrinking number of adults and certainly of youth who have those necessary competencies and skills. If you work backward, what you see is a leaky pipeline. And it starts, as Rahm said, with the failures that we have in our education system, and all the data bears that out. You look at 15-year-olds, and we're stagnant in reading. We are falling behind in math. Then you fast forward, you look at adult competencies, you look at adults up to 65 years old, and what you're finding is literacy, numeracy, the ability to problem solve in a technological age, all of those things are sliding backward. And when you add that together, even though we have this high unemployment rate, we don't have the necessary involvement or the necessary collaboration between those who are training and educating and those who have to hire people to do the jobs that they have available. So finding that point of collaboration, which is so much of what this initiative is about, bringing people together. It isn't malintent. It is a lack of communication, and in fact, communication that's based on data, real information about the kinds of skills that are required and the specific, more granular information about those skills that's serving as a cog in the wheel. So we're trying to remove that so that we can fast forward and make those kinds of connections and provide people with skills based on data.
You talk a lot here at the Institute in your program about opportunity youth, people who've been left behind, disadvantaged, whatever. To what extent is this a youth issue, and to what extent is it an adult issue, and are those separate issues?
It's both. As I said, because we've got that leaky pipeline, it starts with young people. The opportunity youth are those who are 16 to 24 who have been disconnected from our education system, whether they've dropped out or whether they have a GED but haven't gone on to get that certificate or gone on to get that 2-year degree, and all the way into adulthood. We know that about a third of those who are 35 and under are not properly prepared for the workforce today. That's something that the most recent OECD report has told us. So what we have to do is we have to address that issue across the board. And there are many things that are applicable to both populations. For example, we know that if people are getting skills and they're getting training, that's the kind of apprenticeships and internships that are necessary, so they're applying those skills and competencies, that they're much, much better off when they go into the workforce. And that applies to young people. It also applies to adults who need to refresh and keep those skills as they move forward and as jobs and the economy starts to change. So there are many things that we can do for both while we're keeping an eye on the special needs of both of those populations.
Jamie, why did you start this program?
Well, I didn't start it. It was actually our folks who came up with all the brilliant
Why
idea.
did you say yes to your folks?
Yeah. A bank is a permanent investor in the development of communities, with cities or countries or states. And in development, we provide capital, we provide intellectual capital, we give a lot of advice, we help cities, schools, hospitals, states. But we all think the most important thing that we could possibly do is grow faster and create jobs. And when the folks started looking into the job issue, there was the skills gap, which will help create jobs. 4 million jobs, I think that you saw the numbers, 4 million jobs are unfilled. There are 11 million people who are unemployed who want a job. And that could be geographic, it could be education, et cetera. So as long as we're going to put our effort behind something, we want to put our effort behind creating jobs and doing the best we can. There's one big way to fix that issue.
One example though, A, creating jobs, but B, recruiting companies. I'm in the job of getting. So I had Olive Harvey become a transportation distribution logistics school. Walmart, UPS, FedEx, everybody, all the rail companies are in. And 30% of all rail cargo for America comes to the city of Chicago. 30% of all air cargo to the city of Chicago. Can't guarantee you get out, but you can come in. But
You can get out from
yeah, you can get out, weather permitting. Because we are now going to guarantee a steady flow of CDLs, which is the license for truck driving, Aerotram was looking at where they're going to put the largest air cargo facility at a gateway airport. And because I had this school that was going to have a constant flow of truck drivers, which unfortunately has a big turnover, 6 months. They're now building, which all in will be 11,000 jobs in and around both this air cargo facility, so air cargo, international travel. Obviously, we have the airport to handle it. But because I had that school, because they saw what we were doing in the CDL training, they are now building the largest air cargo facility in North America at a gateway airport in Chicago. And so while it's important to fill the jobs, I've actually lured a company. It was not the factor, but it was on the page of the things that we said we could do for them.
That's amazing. And the commercial driver's license that you're talking about,
It's like a 16-week
is that
deal.
something that schools in Chicago or community colleges did before you did this?
I mean, DeVry, had something like that, but we, Northwestern has a transportation school, but it studies traffic.
Yeah.
We never did, look, we're the inland port of America. There's a reason all the transportation major companies are based there, either rail or air. And we never had a school to actually kind of do all the parts of it. And it has, so I wanted to try to say that for a mayor who's trying to recruit companies, and this is going to support, remember, 11,000 jobs. You don't get those. They don't come, just flying into you and they'll hand it to you. And having that facility where they knew there was going to be a steady flow of folks who are going to be trained, they're now part of the curriculum.
And what other sectors are you doing that in?
Well, this is actually, I do want to do a shout out for Brookings came in. I asked Brookings to Institute and McKinsey when I first became mayor, I said, do an economic study, say 10 years out, where do I want to be as a city of Chicago? Give a business plan. And we assiduously were doing the stuff of which skills, actually this was one of the core 10 things we have to get done. One of them was infrastructure, and I can go on for hours about that. But they identified 6 fields that were going to be the most productive because Chicago's economy, unlike a New York or LA, is diversified. No one sector is more than 13% of our employment. Healthcare, transportation, distribution, logistics, convention and hospitality, professional services, IT, and advanced manufacturing. I'll give you one example on the advanced manufacturing. We had studied that we had lost manufacturing jobs, but we had actually gained in the advanced area. So now we have a school, Richard J. Daley, is all advanced manufacturing. The industry runs it. We have all the machinery there. And that's how we do the training. And actually, it's been the best. It's 40% up in enrollment.
And I would say the exact example that Rahm is talking about in Chicago, that's what we have to see more of nationally. And the critical word here is scale. And that's why this particular initiative, I think, is so smart because you heard from J.D. Hoy, Gerald Cherchavian from Europe is here, Dorothy Stoneman from Youth Build, the program I work with, Aspen, the other partners who are here, the thing that they're focusing on is making sure at, for example, the academies, that you're training young people in these fields, in these growth areas, healthcare, manufacturing, financial services, the list goes on, and making sure early on that they've got apprenticeships, they've got internships, they're getting the training, and they go out and they also have a credential or a certificate so that they can go into these fields. But we can't just do this a pocket here and a pocket there. We have to get to scale. We're talking about millions and millions of young people and adults that need need these kinds of skills.
Jamie, I think private industry spends $130 billion or so every year on training. Why isn't that the solution instead of having it be a public-private thing?
I think the numbers are government is $4 billion, private sector is 230 billion. Then you got to keep in perspective too. Private sector employs 110 million people, 115 million people. The government sector, local, city, state, federal government, 20 million people. So that's where the jobs are. A lot of that training is very specialized, et cetera. But you could say we have to retrain the people who we're hiring. And so you could spend the money much more wisely if you do it in a partnership with a school or an organization who knows exactly how to make it happen. So, and my guess is the 130 billion is low. My guess is probably far more than that. Remediation training you do, et cetera.
So what has worked for you? Which of these programs has worked for you, and how would that help the economy? How would you bring it to scale?
So we have tons of programs, and this one just started, but I'll tell you just 2 quick things. We started a program called 100, and I think the audience might be interested in this, 100,000, the mission for 100,000 jobs for veterans. It's almost hired 100,000 people. JPMorgan alone, 7,000, and Maureen Casey, who runs it here. But we started it to say we want to do a better job, but then they did the real work. The work is where are they coming out of the bases? What kind of skills do they have? They didn't know how to do resumes. They have effectively no outplacement in the military. So we've now hired people from call center to equipment maintenance, to communications, to branch managers, to private bankers who were officers in the military. Fabulous program, and it works. And J.D. Hoy, I remember this morning, National Academy Foundation, I was there at the founding, because I was the assistant to Sandy Weil, who was, I guess it was his brainchild. And I don't know how many kids have been through that program now, but what I remember, because I used to meet with them, I haven't done that for a while, I'm going to do it again. I remember meeting with these kids. They were in high school, given the curriculum. We needed in financial services some operations, some accounting, specialized knowledge. We had to teach the teachers how to do it. But the thing that amazed me the most with these kids, and you mentioned internship, is that they went to work and they enjoyed it. And almost every single one had no idea what a company would be like, and they thought they might not like a job, and they thought it'd be boring, and they didn't realize that people are normal and make jokes and have a good time, and that and a lot of these kids go to college. Yeah, they do it. They do it big financial companies.
End of the White House.
Oh
right?
no, we used to
There's
a
a
big.
lot of material there, and I'm going to leave
Now,
it
yeah,
alone.
go for it.
Okay?
Go for it.
No, but,
I'm on my medication, so I'm going to leave it alone.
But so how would you scale it so that it works nationally? What type of skills should we be focused on? How is new skills at work? And
Well, I'm going to leave it to the experts, because in the room you have National Academy Foundation, Year Up. There are a bunch of other people. You're going to do it a little bit in the UK too. And we're going to actually get all the real detail at the detail level, because at the local level it takes place. And the government does some programs, which I guess some work and some don't work. But part of this is to learn, to get the data, to get the detail, to figure out what works, and then invest in what works. I mean, this country, we invest a lot, and nothing wrong with testing, nothing wrong with trying. We have to learn to, when it doesn't work, to kill it and try something else, or give the money to something we already know works.
what do we say works?
Well, we know, for example, that the relationship between education and employment is critical. And as I was saying before, getting those skills and getting those skills early and getting actual practical work experience, that's one thing that we know works. We also know that integrating the remedial skills that Rahm was talking about in workplace training, particularly for adults, who don't have time to say, oh my gosh, I don't have these reading or literacy skills, but at the same time I have to feed my family. Integrating those things actually works. So we're working with partners here who have a track record, who have been working with companies all along, who work with and believe in data to try and scale these kinds of programs up. But I would say that the data issue here is very, very important, and also the ability to leverage what's already happening. We've talked a little bit about some of the government programs, and even though the private sector is a huge, huge trainer, the largest trainer, those government programs and sending the right incentives, showing what works so that the government can also take and scale those programs, I think is also something that's critical to making this effective.
I would agree with Melody, but Melanie and I worked on this in the White House together. Yes. There are 46 separate government job training programs. You couldn't, I mean, we battled trying to get them to consolidate, make it a program where you can have a certificate and then go to wherever you wanted to go to get your training. So I'm kind of like, forget that. Because actually we're going to prove a different model, and I think you're going to find places that work and that are different. Here's the way I mean, we kind of approached it is, City of Chicago's 35% of our population, a third, has a 4-year college degree or better. In the United States, it's 27%. So the big part of our economic study, keep that gap. Now the good news is we got great 4-year institutions. We have more alumni also, not just from our city and state. We have more alumni from the Big 10 universities and states than any other city in America. I mean, on graduation day between Madison, Wisconsin, and the city of Chicago, don't get on the highway. You'll be roadkill, okay? I mean, and that's great for us. I have, though, between the 7 institutions of the community colleges, 127 people go to the school, 127,000. More people go to the community colleges than all 4-year institutions combined in the city of Chicago, and we have 14 of them.
And are those community colleges sort of under your purview?
It's the mayor of the city of Chicago, yes. Yes. Yeah, I persuaded them to do this. Yes, they did this.
And I know what that kind of persuasion looks like.
So what we did actually, it was a very. Here's the one thing that you should. So what I wanted to do is in the race for competition for this is about skills gap. Yeah. There's a skills race going on, and companies now are moving back into cities, and I not only have to offer them a Booth Business School MBA and a Kellogg School MBA and a 4-year person from Wisconsin or Notre Dame or Northwestern. I got to make sure somebody can go down and fix the computer. I got to make sure somebody can actually handle the security downstairs. You have to offer them certainty from the corporate suite to the guy meeting people at the front door and the lady. And what I believe is I can tell any future employer or a person that's looking to expand that I will offer you Booth School MBA, Kellogg School MBA, and everything between. Because the city colleges, 127,000, are getting trained based on the curriculum you develop. We're going to win every time.
Does that mean rethinking the community college system and putting more emphasis on it?
Absolutely. It is the, I mean, we're using that as our tool in this aspect because it's, I have 7 institutions that are phenomenal. We also renegotiated the teacher's contract. It's on a pay for performance. So if you train somebody to become a nurse, they become a nurse, you get a bonus. If they become something else, you don't get a bonus. And so it's aligned with this. It's aligned with the city's growth perspective. And it ensures that and I'll give one other example. I talked to you about Aerotron. I've convinced Whole Foods to come into a food desert. And they were looking and looking and looking. I said, go to our school, Kennedy King, in Englewood, that's on culinary and hospitality. The students there will staff and work with, and they're going a block away from Kennedy King. It's the first major store by Whole Foods in a food desert. I got something at O'Hare Airport. We have some here, but it's a classic example of you can recruit companies if you give them employee certainty. It is the biggest challenge. I mean, Jamie's right. When you go look at where you're going to expand, what market, workforce, and it's not just what we're doing, from top to bottom. That's what we have to offer people.
I emphasize it's even more important because this is obviously a good mayor and a very well-run city. But when you want to grow. No, but I'm saying it's also when a business wants safety, they want logistics, they want training, they want culture, they want taxes, which are not going to kill them. They want, and so really good management of cities and states is really important. And you mentioned they're competing with each other a little bit. I'll just add one other level of competition. It's global. We compete with other institutions around the world, and they want to eat our lunch. So we as a nation have to really be thinking that we do have competition. We don't live on an island, and that those folks, you're competing with Singapore now.
I always say,
and Shanghai is your sister city, and
in local media they say it's Chicago versus the suburbs. I said no, it isn't. It's the metropolitan area versus what's going on in Asia, what's going on in Europe, and they can go anywhere, and we have to have the full menu of capacity that they want to come to.
Yeah, I was here yesterday, and I think Josh Weiner, who runs the Community College Excellence Program, is here. Yeah. But we were in a meeting with community college presidents, with university presidents, and with employers. And one of the things they said was their biggest concern is that the economic opportunity is out there, and it's increasing, but we are going to go into that era with a population that can't capitalize on it. So innovation in the community college system and innovation in higher education is critically important to that in the way that Rahm described. It is something else that we worked on when we were in the White House and trying to ensure that we're bringing together employers and community colleges, particularly for an adult population, with curriculum and also the other kinds of services that are going to support that population as they either get a certificate or get a 2-year degree, and in some cases take that 2-year degree and they transfer on to 4-year. But basically it's about ensuring the competencies that are needed with employers. The other thing I'll say is that I have spoken to so many employers, and this also happened when I was in the White House, who said, if my shareholders knew how much time I spent thinking about and worrying about this issue, they would be stunned, because they recognize that the pipeline just isn't there, and it's a critical issue to placement and to growth and to competition.
Can I add two important things? Opportunity for kids, for everyone in America, is a really important thing, for my opinion, for the morality of America. And we don't have that today. These groups have opportunity, and these have none. So to get in that door creates that opportunity, and it creates a better society. And then there's a lot of conversation about income inequality. There are very legitimate issues about that. opportunity, jobs, and giving jobs to people who might not otherwise have had those opportunities is going to be one really important way to fix it.
But the opportunity gap starts at K through 12, not at the community college level. What do you need to do? What needs to be done to fix that part of the skills gap?
Okay, that's way beyond my competency. And a lot of people have been working that for a long time.
Well, it's actually your
and
wife's competency.
my wife is an expert in that, and she helped do community schools in Chicago because we lived in Chicago and loved it there. But you all would know a lot more about K through 12 than I do. So.
What do you do with K through 12? I know you have a new contract that has teacher assessments, that has longer days.
Yeah, we're gonna. The good news is for the city of Chicago, we had our biggest jump in graduation to the highest level ever, and 5 years out from now, we're going to be at 80%. This is from the system William Bennett once said was the worst in America. 80% graduation rate, highest college attendance ever. And I was just telling Jamie and Melody before we walked out, of the top 5 high schools in the state of Illinois, 4 of them are in the city of Chicago. Top 10 elementary schools, 7 of them are in the city of Chicago. So it's actually turning around. First thing I did for this year, for the first time in the city of Chicago's history, we have a universal kindergarten full day. We spend, I said this to the president right after the election. If we spend a lot on Pell Grants, a lot on college, I'm all for it, all for it. Give me half that money and put it into early childhood education. Talk about a pipeline. You have kids for a host of social, economic, cultural, historical reasons. Parents aren't reading to. Get them into school, get them learning. 7 hours a day. Now we added 5,000 kids to pre-K, full day with wraparound, and what it was wraparound? Services for their parents, which is education for their parents who never had it. The earlier you get, the better. It's gonna. I mean, I know all the data you can go over. We all know it on it. That's number one. Number two, I'm a strong believer in these Common Core education. I think we're doing it in the city of Chicago. We do have the full school day, full school year. We used to have the shortest. It is the largest increase in time ever in the history of the, not just the city, in the country. So you get it. A child starting first grade, by the time they finish high school, now gets 2.5 more hours in the classroom than the prior. That's what the whole length of the education does, 2.5 more years literally in the classroom. So those are some of the things. I would also say we have 5 STEM schools that are 9th to 14th grade. Each school is identified with a corporation, IBM, Microsoft, Motorola. They do both mentoring, summer internships. If you finish 14th grade, you're guaranteed a job interview at the company that sponsored the school.
Wow.
Guaranteed. And a lot like IBM, these are $45,000, $50,000 a year jobs. The other piece we're not talking here, you could go on for hours. One of the things we're also doing at the community colleges and we're thinking about taking into schools, elementary schools, is what we call soft skills. And now we're making it going towards a mandatory for graduation in the college to career that you have to have soft skill training. And when a lot of these kids, if they get apprenticeships or summer internships, that's where they're getting it anyway. We got to make it part of the curriculum because it's a new experience. And that I would add, there could be a whole discussion and debate just about that. But there's the hard skills we're talking about, but there's a soft skills piece of this that's as complementary to the hard skills that and there's a lot of research to back that up. So that's the other thing we're doing in our transition. And we're getting dual credits and dual enrollment in high school. So kids are already getting free college credit so they don't have to pay for it later.
How do you deal with the adult that needs training for skills to the workforce, or the person in their 20s or 30s where it's not a K through 12 issue?
Well, I think community colleges play a huge role for all the reasons that we've discussed, but also we're looking at some of we're working with some of the programs out there that are dealing with that population. So while some of them, you've got 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and many of them are working to help their families make sure that ends meet. But we're also talking about younger adults and those who are heading into their 30s. And what we need is this continuous pathway of learning. For them. We need to make sure that those who have remedial needs, that they can get them while they're also working and also making money and getting a credential that has labor market value. We also have to make sure that those kinds of credentials are stackable and that, again, they're competency focused, that they actually were not just focused on seat time, but we're focused on the kinds of skills that people have when they finished. But when they finish, they can add on to that. That 16-week certificate, you can add on to that, and you can move up the ladder, and you can, in some cases, get a 2-year degree, go on to get a 4-year degree. But we have to stop thinking about learning as though it's something that you get, by the time you're finished with high school, or that you get after 2 years, but it is a continuous pathway for all Americans all the way through adulthood.
Jamie, let me ask you a philosophical question, because you said earlier on today that this was a moral issue for America, making sure everybody had an opportunity.
The immigration issue.
Yeah, but
the other one too. Yeah.
But everything, the opportunity issue is what America's narrative is all about. Why is it a moral issue, and also to what extent is it an economic issue for our economy to continue to grow, having skills to work
I think
for
the
us?
moral issue is that it's just that people should recognize that, therefore, by the grace of God go they. Had they been born in a different place or born in a circumstance they didn't have these opportunities, they wouldn't have what they have. So I think we would all feel better if people were always given those opportunities. Society generally has been getting better over time. It may have, the last decade gotten worse in certain areas, but that's been the American way. That's why people came to this country, was for opportunity, and they were given opportunity. They weren't just given a door that the day you're born you have absolutely no chance. And I think we have too much of that taking place. We're a very wealthy nation. We owe it to ourselves to continually create the opportunity for people. And then when you say, why is that good for economic? There's probably an Einstein in there somewhere. There's a Steve Jobs that is, that could have been a Steve Jobs but never had a chance, didn't go to a university or so. So I think it's the moral thing to do, but it certainly would be the economic thing to do.
Does it hold your bank back that you have a skills gap there?
It holds society back. So it doesn't, if you say, can JPMorgan navigate, most big companies can navigate around some of these things, but most big companies do the same thing, that it holds back all of society and the economy, and obviously JPMorgan economically do better if the country's doing better.
Do you worry that the country has become less of a country of economic opportunity and equality of opportunity?
It's still, if you travel the world, okay, this country is still the best there is. And it has huge opportunity, but there's more and more of a group of people who have none. That's what I'm talking about. So it's not distracting from those who've had it and have done well and successful and all that. It's acknowledging the people who don't have that chance. They didn't have the schools, they didn't have the families, they didn't have the nutrition, and so that's what I'm trying to acknowledge. That's a global issue. It's not just an American issue. Mm-hmm.
Walter, because I think that's such an important question, and a number of us in the room work with a population that we do call opportunity youth. Used to be disconnected youth, but the reason we use that terminology is because when you talk to these young people, and we have, what you find is they are very hopeful about their future, they believe in their ability to contribute, and they want to be involved not only in the workforce, but also in civic society. But what we also know is that when young people don't have those skills, when they don't have that opportunity, they disconnect not only from education and the workforce, but they aren't contributing. The cost to the country in 2011 dollars was $95 billion a year. A year. When you look at the lifetime cost for that population and you account for lost wages and cost to the juvenile justice system, cost to the healthcare system, you're talking about a $4 trillion problem. So it is absolutely an economic problem for the country, but at the same time, you realize, as Jamie was just saying, there but for the grace of God go I, and you talk to young people, as one of my colleagues often says, who need a second chance, and they never even got a first chance. I will never, ever forget, this past summer I was in Brooklyn, and I met a young man who was part of the Youth Build program. His name was Chris. Chris found out that he was thrown away, and I don't mean that figuratively. I mean literally, he was found in the trash as an infant. He was discouraged over the course of his education from completing school. He had all the kinds of problems you could imagine accompany that. But through a Youth Build program, one of the programs that this initiative supports, he has turned his life around. He has a credential. He's an active member of his community. He volunteers. He's helping to support his family. So for this population, absolutely a moral issue, absolutely an economic issue, and tied in with other youth and with adults, we can make sure that we have a population that's trained to help us become competitive globally, but also support their families and lead a happy, economically secure life.
Ram, you've watched it over the years, this notion of what American politics can be, what government can do, and what we as a society can do. Why is it so important for America's moral narrative that we have the ability to get people to have skills so they can get a job?
Well, I'm going to pick up on both what Melody and Jamie said. They've answered. It's a moral imperative because, I mean, look, I'm about to do something when I go back to Chicago on immigration. My grandfather came to America, 13 years old, by himself, because his parents wanted to get him out of the pogroms. I don't think that he would have thought in a generation his grandson would be the mayor of the city of Chicago. Another grandson would be a doctor. Another one would be an agent.
2 for 3.
Yeah. But if you ask each son, they would say it's the other two. So this is a great. This is the greatest country. You don't see people flocking to go to Japan. I don't know disrespect to Japan or anywhere. People come here because they can give their children what they could never do in their country of origin. Not that they don't love that country. They love what this country could be for them and their children. And what we're doing here is not only for those that are, you call the opportunity gap or opportunity children, but it's also for, I got to tell you this, we did this at our community colleges. You're a veteran, you did a truck driving, you get credit for that. You don't have to repeat it at our community colleges because you served your country. You ran the ER in Iraq or Afghanistan, we don't have to teach you any skills, you already know how to do it. You do it better. We don't give you credit. This is a great country of opportunity. What we're doing is making sure that our educational system links people into the economy and they have the capacity to compete and win. Everybody has that capacity. Everybody. And if they can compete and win, we're going to compete and win. That's how I think of the city of Chicago. And here's the thing. I always say this. Kids, any part of the city can see downtown Chicago. Unbelievable architecture. All the excitement and energy and opportunity of an economy that's growing and all that potential. Now, they may be 2 miles away. But for a lot of kids who walk out of the school, it could be another city. And the only way I know how to bridge that physical or that opportunity gap to being just a physical distance is through our schools, whether that's kindergarten all the way to our community colleges and our 4-year institutions. And our greatest, I will say this, it is true the way I recruit companies, GE Transportation Worldwide moved to the city of Chicago. Why? We have unbelievable institutions, meaning of higher learning. It is the single greatest economic engine for the city of Chicago is our educational system. Well, if it is true for the companies that we have these great 4-year institutions, then it's even more true that because of the community colleges, the skills, and what we're doing through our K through 12, that we will continue to be the great city. But I have to make sure it's for all the children of the city of Chicago. Because otherwise, the biggest challenge for metropolitan areas going forward we will be a haves and have-nots. And that is not acceptable, not just on a moral level, economically. You cannot be a haves and have-not and be the city that we want to be, a great world-class city. It's not possible.
I'm going to ask the two of you to give me some examples of what you think is working, and then I'm going to open it up. So I have some questions ready. Give me some of the inspiring examples you've seen, Melody, of things that work and how we can bring them to scale.
Well, I look at the work that's happening in the academies, and the idea that young people can enter into those programs, that they are linked to our public schools, and that they can get very specific kinds of skills and experiences. And I see that that works. I was just talking about Chris, who is but one example of those young people that I have met through Youth Build, and I see that that works. Again, it's about getting skills. It's about getting kind of wraparound support and services. What I've heard over and over from young people is also access to mentors and people who are helping them, pushing them, and guiding them. And also getting that credential. So I know that that works. You look at programs like iBest, like P-Tech, those programs also work. And those are the kinds of models that we're talking about. But I would say, if I had to aggregate all this, that a lot of this has to focus on systemic change. Because we can find programs that work in very specific areas, but unless we start to think about big system change to counter the system change, the systems that are not working well, then we're going to end up with
What do you mean by systems changing?
when you talk about the public school system, when you talk about looking at community college systems, when you talk about connecting that to reform in the foster care system, we have to stop thinking about a few good programs, or as someone said, being program rich and system poor, but linking those things together across the pathway that I talked about earlier and plugging those leaks. So that's the big thing that I see that's necessary, and also that leads to this idea of scaling and getting to the kinds of numbers that we're talking about.
I think the best one I know the best, but it's exactly the same thing as the military, where you got all these very trained people who are trained in leadership, teamwork, accomplishing missions, getting things done. They don't even know they have the skills. They don't realize that they were an engineer for maintain equipment or communications expert or logistics expert. And when they're getting out of the military, they have no idea what they're looking at. They don't even know how to do a resume. They've been busy. They've been busy doing some really important stuff for the rest of us. And so just connecting them, writing the resume, getting the job descriptions, getting them to meet people, getting them when they first enter to learn a little bit of what the new world's like. It's a different culture when you go to a company than when you were in the military. So they adjust. Some need a little extra help. Make sure they get the extra help. So these programs, when they're really designed well, they work.
All right, I'm going to open it up. I'm actually going to start with John Bridgeland, if I may, because John is doing a project that involves trying to get a year of national service, which is in some ways creating the workplace skills. I mean, it's not done just for the service reason. It's done, if I'm correct, because you want to actually give people the first step on a ladder to having the skills you need to go in the workplace. Do you want to describe that and maybe ask?
Sure, I didn't realize you were going to call on the audience, Walter, but General McChrystal came back from Afghanistan and Iraq, said for the first time in history, less than 1% of Americans are serving in our nation's military during war, leading to the complacent assumption that serving the country is somebody else's job. And so he comes forward with this idea for large-scale civilian national service, which I know, Rahm, you and Bruce Reed wrote about in your book, and Melody has worked on in the White House. But I think what's connected to this subject today is that we actually want to look at how a service year and the skills, Jamie, you said, teamwork, leadership, collaborative problem solving, grit, persistence, and then understanding the reality of problems in local communities can actually be credentialed. So you do your service year, perhaps you get some course credit. You look at how veterans like Jack Gardner come back from war and they have skills that they've learned that in turn employers and colleges value. And so that's part of the process we're looking at, and it's an Aspen Institute project. We're doing the summit at Gettysburg, June 4th through 6th, to drive home this notion that military and civilian service are two sides of the same coin, and that everybody 18 to 28, including opportunity youth, ought to have a service year experience. It could be in the Army, it could be in AmeriCorps, it could be in the Navy, it could be in the Peace Corps. But to also reflect this notion that it's not just about growing our economy, but also giving back to the country.
Yeah, question. Was it you wanted there? Shout.
I have a question for Mayor Emanuel. Or
Sure.
else. Thank you. Catherine Skiba from the Chicago Tribune. For the city of Chicago in 2014, how much money might people get? Who gets the money and where does it go for, please? Your anticipation.
You mean from this?
Yes.
You didn't think I flew out here just for the charming of it?
Yeah.
No. Look, they'll make a decision. The reason I wanted to participate, and I've talked to JPMorgan, they're going to come in and evaluate what we're doing on our skills side and what we're doing on our community college piece of this, and they'll make a determination of what, if anything, but I believe we're well positioned.
Are you persuasive?
Yeah, no. But I think that we'll get the resources to continue to apply. They're going to look at different things and evaluate us and what we're doing. I happen to think, the World Bank just did a report on the college to career program for the city of Chicago and said it's the best skill development program they've seen in the country. Now, when I became mayor, our graduation rate was 7% from the community colleges, the worst in the country. It's now doubled, and we are actually getting our enrollment is way up, and specifically in this college career, and they'll look at it and evaluate it, and I think we stand well based on the improvements we've made.
So explain a little bit more. How are you going to pitch, and what are you going to pitch, and what do you hope to get?
Well, I'm going to ground Jamie's plane in Chicago. No, we're going to go out.
You also have a carrot. I heard you offer a helicopter. Yeah.
I actually think, here's the thing. I think we're going to present people. I'm going to make a specific pitch. Now, you should know, so this is not an accident, JPMorgan is already a part of what we're doing at Harold Washington on professional services. They're part of that curriculum development. If they want to go specifically to that school, we're going to design that if that's our best chance of winning resources. If it's system-wide, meaning all 7 schools that we have in the system, we'll design it, whichever helps us get the resources into this specific area. That's how we're going to do it. We do it with everybody, like we apply like that.
Do you think mayors
That's not a
are
shot.
better?
Breaking news, we're going to figure out which way it works best.
All right, but you were chief of staff at the White House when you had 42 or 56 or whatever job training programs, and now you're mayor. Do you think mayors are better off at figuring out how you actually put the money on the ground to work?
You know, yes. The short answer is yes, because it's not just we are closer. We can actually follow it and hold people accountable. It's not like I'm closer to the ground and I know what works. We're closer to the ground, but we can hold people accountable that work for us that actually do the implementation. We set the goals. And so it's not just, Washington is too removed, to actually hold anybody. You got to wait years for a GAO study, then that goes on the bookshelf until the next GAO study. We can actually hold people if we're committed to something accountable. Let me say this. The college career did not exist in the city of Chicago until I became mayor. Mm-hmm. I met for the last 3 weeks. I brought in the industry leaders with the chancellor, the head of the school, in my office for an hour, each of the 6 schools. Now, you have to dedicate time. You got to push a system. You got to take a bureaucracy and move it like this. You can't do that out of Washington. Mm-hmm. And you just can't give me a check if I'm not interested in it. It ain't going to happen. You got to be like a jackhammer coming at this thing to move a system along. And the advantage of a mayor is, if you're really passionate about something, you can hold the people that work for you accountable to deliver results that you think are a priority. It's that simple.
But I think we also recognized, or started to recognize that. I mean,
And you have a little neuroses, and that helps too.
It's fun to work with too.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we recognized and worked together on was this idea of greater innovation in states and in localities, even from the perch of being in the White House. And there's an innovation fund. There's an effort to put an innovation fund into the reauthorization of the Workforce Investment Act to provide for exactly this kind of thing that Rahm is talking about. Also, specifically to this programming for Chicago and for the other cities that are involved, what we're thinking about and what we're planning on, one, look at the partners that are already going to be recipients of these grant funds. They are working in these cities and they have best-in-class programs. So that's one way to put resources into those areas. The other thing we've talked a little bit about is this idea of the data gap reports. This is very, very, very important. Unless we tool our workforce education system to data, to evidence, to what's working, to the jobs that are coming online, we aren't going to be able to provide the right kind of curriculum for people. So by going into these different areas, including Chicago, and looking at what jobs are needed, looking at the kinds of skills that are needed, looking at the job postings, talking to the trainers in those areas, and aggregating that information in a smart data gap report, we're providing the kind of information that's going to help move Chicago and others forward in line with the kind of economic development program that Rahm has already sketched out and that other mayors are sketching out in their
To
cities.
give you a classic to the Tribune question is, Melody's going to sit on this. She's talking about scale. We have an entire community college system that affects 127,000 students. I think I'm going to put scale in my application. I figured it out.
Yeah.
There it is. But it was a story here because when we were doing the reconciliation, Melody and I helped get $2 billion into this whole vocational educational program in the national level when we were working on this together in the White House. So we have a lot of history on this basis. Thank you, Mayor.
Adrian Talbot.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, I come from I'm Chris Rivers, by the way, from New York City. I come from a utilities background, and I'm curious with all the advancing technologies in the energy space, how do you see that as an ability for energy companies to help you fill this gap and play a role in this process?
Rahm and then
No, go ahead, Mel.
Melody.
You go, Mel.
One, I just think every region is different. And so understanding, obviously energy is a huge, huge driver of the economy, but understanding the jobs that are important to particular regions and making sure that trainers, educators are providing the skills and the curriculum necessary so people can go into the jobs that you all are bringing online. That's obviously very, very important. That's part of what we want to see happen regionally, but also part of the story that we want to tell on a national level for the way that this can be done. But
Exelon in the city of Chicago, well, statewide they're doing it, but they're starting in the city of Chicago, is the largest city to have the smart grid installation. Guess what? We have a shortage of linemen that understand how to do it. So they're building a training facility. We're going to work with, we're working with them as part of the legislation. They're building a training facility to help people train on the most important part of the work that has to be done for the smart grid system. They also, GE has a factory that builds actually the pieces. Part of what we work through is that factory in the city of Chicago is going to get the contract. They're adding 100 jobs, and it's a factory that's been there for a long time. So both from the new training facility Exelon's putting it in place, I think we're breaking ground this summer, to what GE has in the city of Chicago that actually builds the meters. There's are places that you're going to train people, and GE has their own training. They already have that. But the lineman work and what Exelon needs to actually go do the installation, there's a shortage of skilled people. Because actually, if you look at their age area, and this is where data is so essential, those people with those skills are getting older and older and retiring at a quicker rate.
But one of the things that brings up is the notion that the jobs change pretty quickly. We would not have thought smart grid engineers and, say, hydraulic water engineers for fracking would be the two big jobs that would, if we thought 5 years ago, we wouldn't have put those at the top of the list.
This is, it's overlooked, and I know when Melody, I hope if I've been pushed into this, is stackable degrees. So what is happening now, when you think community college, I would guarantee when I first said that, a lot of people think 2-year colleges, which is true. But the stackable degrees now are you go in 18 weeks, you get your certificate, you're out and you're certified to do X. That means also if you want to come back and you want to do a stackable transportation distributed logistics, you get a degree for truck driving, but you actually now want to go get a degree or the certificate that allows you to run a modern logistics system for a Walmart. That's another like 18 weeks or whatever the time. So it's a stackable, it's not just the way we grew up thinking about it. 2 years, maybe potential 4-year, that exists. These stackable certificates allow people to come in and out of the educational system while they're working, add their skills, go on to the next job that's higher paid, hopefully.
Jamie, what skills do you see that we're going to need in the next 5 years that we're short of?
Well, look, when you talk about industries, there's a lot of basics which are the same in every industry. Okay, communications, logistics, transportation, finance, accounting. In some businesses, marketing, sales, obviously technology will be a big one, and it does change really quickly. I think the rate of change is permanent. It's going to always be this fast, and so this has got to be a living, breathing, dynamic thing, not just a static. We're one and done. You probably go back 100 years ago, someone got a job and they got on-the-job training. If you learn to read or write, you can get a job. Now people want to see that you can actually run that that computer or something like that. So, and then I think there are general management skills that people have to learn too. And I mean, it's a whole long set.
But as a bank, you probably have your finger on the pulse of what's coming up in the economy. What would you want a program like this to have accomplished in 5 years?
Oh, but as a bank, remember we have call centers all the way to rocket scientists who work on PhDs in math and
but
technology.
you also deal with businesses large and small saying, what are your needs for the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean,
you allocate capital.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of everything. It's hard for me to pick one for that.
But investment in the United States, why has there been a holding back, sidelining of capital for investment?
So I had mentioned to Walter before that one of the things that drives jobs is capital expenditures. And so you actually do a chart of capital expenditures and jobs, and there's this, and just think about it, someone builds a plant, usually costs $5 billion or something, they've got 1,000 or 5,000 jobs in it, 25,000 jobs outside of it, usually a multiplier of 5. These jobs are called big business, these jobs are generally middle market, small business, and I was mentioning Walter, the capital expenditures as a percent of GDP are lower than they've been since, I believe, the Depression. I think they dipped that way in '09, and now they're kind of back there. I don't know. You know, I think it's, you know, you can make a long list of all the reasons, you know, policy uncertainties, you know, tax policies, immigration policies hurts. You know, I know of companies who are building their research centers overseas because that's where they can hire the people they need. So that's money. That's real capital being invested. And but the sad thing is that's permanent. I mean, so I tell people the only question is how much damage is done before we come up with rational, you know, tax and immigration policies and stuff like that. So it'll come back. You know, animal spirits will come back. I think there's a chance America will do quite well next year. Businesses want to grow. I don't know of any you've never seen a business who says, I want to shrink. I want to shrink. You know, the default switch is to grow. They look at their order books, they look at their comfort, they look at, you know, how what's going on in the local areas they do business in. It'll come back. And I don't know the exact number of how much was going overseas right now, but I do think that's a piece of it.
And you think manufacturing will come back to America too?
Yeah, I think, you know, manufacturing, and particularly like what you call advanced manufacturing. So Jeff Immel tells the story, you probably heard of that. And when they sent refrigerators down to Mexico to be made, it took 40 man-hours, and fuel was cheap. You know, now it takes 4 man-hours, and the cost of, you know, delivering refrigerators is higher. But since the cost of the energy input's coming down, so if you're a manufacturer with high energy input, well, America's become the best place in the world. You buy natural gas here, literally, it's hard to believe what I'm about to say, 5 times cheaper than you buy liquid natural gas, in Japan. Right. So that's a competitive advantage. Companies will move manufacturing back here, and we shouldn't, as a country, lose our manufacturing base. So I think it's a policy issue too, to make sure we have at least the advanced manufacturing knowledge, and so we see it coming. I don't know if it'll change unemployment by 3%, but it certainly will add.
No, I think the price of natural gas, single biggest event in America for the next 30 years.
But you're bringing back advanced manufacturing to the area too.
I do want to, you know, again, I'm going to underscore something Melody said, which is the data. Part of this Brookings McKinsey study I had ordered as mayor when I first got there, it showed that we had lost over the decade prior manufacturing jobs. But it did show in that a sliver that actually we had held our own and slightly improved in the advanced manufacturing. So I could have at Richard J. Daley, which is on the west side near the suburbs, southwest side of the city, I could have said we'll just do manufacturing. We decided to anchor it in advanced manufacturing because that is where we had held our own without this. But it was not going to hold much longer, so we put it all in that area, and it happened to be not just my decision. That's what the industry, when I put a board together, the industry has a person full-time, usually, working at the school helping develop, and I would argue if you go talk to Lawrence Goodman at Rush Presbyterian Hospital. He was in my office last week when they did the Malcolm X presentation. Revolutionized what's going on between their education, our education, and the pipeline system that now feeds the hospital. And so that's what we're doing. The industry asked for it, and so we're going to do it.
Way in the back there. Yes.
Yes, I'm from the Chicago area. The school at Proviso High School, which is now at East and West.
Yeah.
That was back in the 60s. That was back in the 60s. I think I got the best education I have ever received. Went on to the University of Illinois. What Proviso did, and I think we need to bring it back to the schools, and I taught for 18 years. I'm also a businesswoman. But I think we're losing our kids on the high school level because we have kids that aren't college bound, but do want to learn skills, are not college bound. Yep. What Proviso did, which was incredible, they had vocational training. Those that wanted to do the college route were able to do that. I was able to not only do the college route, but I also took some of the vocational training, which gave me skills. So when I came to Washington, I worked for Senator Javits as a typist. And I learned whole economic courses. I think what we need to do is you need to look at the high schools, and let's bring that vocational training back in there. We have some of the most successful graduates from Proviso. Shelvin Hall is your Attorney General. I mean, the most successful business people in the Chicago area that came out of the Proviso system.
Do you think we made a mistake in demeaning vocational training and VOTEC? And can we turn that around, if so? Melody?
I do, and this is such an important point, and several of us were talking about it earlier. There is a stigma attached to what when I was in high school was known as vocational education. Now we call career and technical education. And that's because there were bad things that happened. I mean, there was certainly tracking of particularly low income and minority students. But in the course of trying to unravel that, we just kind of threw the baby away with the bathwater. And as opposed to recognizing the importance of vocational effort of education, the fact that many students, that's what they want to do, and that it has to sit on top of a very good education. Every student should get a good education. There are other students, some students who want to go down the voc ed path or CTE path, some who fit in your category who will go on to college, but also want those skills, want the training, the internships, and the apprenticeships that go along with that. So we have to get rid of the stigma, and we also have to focus on putting appropriate resources into what most people call CTE now.
This is precisely what they're trying to do here. But when I just give an example, in Germany, the unemployment rate in Europe is 12%. In Germany, I think it's under 8%, so substantially less than the rest. They have a program which is kind of government business, local, I think very local, where at 15 or 16, you kind of start to make career choices. A third of the people going to college, 2/3 going to vocational, and it's really certification for the local businesses. So the local businesses are deeply involved in that, and there's always jobs. So that it works for the people, it works for the country, it works for the businesses there. So, and one of the things we can do is learn from other people who do it quite well. There are people around the world who've come up with some really neat things that we should learn from and emulate.
Yeah, the administration just, I'm sorry, no, go for it.
This is one of the rare times I'm going to do this, so go ahead.
And I'm going to take it.
Melanie is not used to Rahm deferring.
Hey, you never worked for Melanie. I'll take the rap, but Melanie's not one for silence, so go ahead. Yeah.
But I would say just 2 weeks ago, the administration put out about $100 million to reform high schools in the career and technical education space. It's a one-time investment. But they did it to jumpstart this conversation from the federal government perspective.
2 points. One is we just took our CTE dollars that Melanie was talking about and put them all to, we're now going to have computer coding in elementary school. So computer coding will become the language. That's what bilingual, I think, means in the future, and we're going to make sure the city of Chicago has that. So you'll have your English, and you're going to know computer coding. And that's going to be essential. And that was just taking the dollars and thinking about the future different. And everybody, whatever the vocational or other type of education, you're going to need to know that language. It's essential. The second thing is we talk about vocational, and Melanie brought up the history. It used to be you were tracking kids into low expectations. So rather than kind of reform it, the answer was we threw it out, which is a big mistake. And that was the only way the system could handle it. It was kind of first gear or fifth gear. There was no nuance to it. I do think the real challenge here isn't so much vocational. Everybody has to know that high school is not the end. There's a cultural piece. It used to be, which is why I say I am happy we've got a better high school graduation rate. I constantly say to the system, I want to know what our college acceptance and attendance is, meaning what is going on after they leave. And more important, and that has to be a change attitude. The biggest thing, whether it's like the 9th grade to 14th grade, the dual credit, dual enrollment, changing the community college, is getting the mindset that education is linked into a career and a job. And whether it's vocational, 4-year, or postgraduate, there is a part of our, at least for the city of Chicago, that the link between what you're doing in high school biology and your career is broken. And what we really are doing in the high school, and what you're calling for, whether it's vocational education, is linking what they understand their education will do for the rest of their lives. And that link is broken, and what we're really trying to do is, in the high school years, is tighten up that connection between what they're doing here with the rest of their lives. I would say one other thing, we're talking about the public sector. The only way I could do what I'm doing is I brought companies together. I actually want to challenge the private sector to do what JPMorgan and others have done. And it's not just, this is not checkbook charity, because I can tell you firsthand what's going on in Harold Washington, in the city of Chicago, Harold Washington Community College. You want skilled workers? Go to your community college. Offer the next mayor, I got this, but in a lot of states, it's state controlled. Go in and say, this is what I'm growing. I'm ready to grow if you give me X. But you can't sit back and bemoan skill gap if you're in corporate America and you haven't done anything in your education, whether it's for-profit or anything else, because I cannot get to where I need to go if the industry didn't dedicate time and money on the front end actually working on the curriculum. And it takes, we're just launching this. This has been 2 years of work to get to where I think we're now poised. But if industry says, oh, we have a skills gap, and then they go on to their next cocktail party, well, forget about it. You have an obligation, if you want to see this country succeed and your company succeed, get in, roll up your sleeves, put some time into it, and you'll find an amazingly open door in the public sector to help.
We said we have to end at 1:30, so I'm going to use Rahm's statement there to allow both of Melody and Jamie to sort of wrap it up. How do you respond to that challenge? You've come out of the public sector and seen how the private sector works, and of course you're from the private sector. How do we make this work?
Well, this initiative is put in place to do exactly that. And I'm looking forward to, today we announce it. Today Jamie announces it, but tomorrow all the work begins in terms of partnering with these fantastic group of nonprofits and that are in the room and others, as well as this collaboration as Jamie chairs and I co-chair this council that hopes to do exactly what Rahm is talking about, bring the private sector to the table with educators, with nonprofits, to make sure that we're not speaking past one another, but we're actually informing the debate and we're informing the kind of skills and the skills development that's put in place in the United States.
Yeah, so I would just add that business is a huge force in this country with jobs and capital expenditures, but it needs to work in collaboration. So the civic society of city governments, not-for-profits, businesses, it works done properly. It does not work if we think we're going to war with each other. JPMorgan won't be a successful company if we aren't a good corporate citizen around the world. And we want to be always there. Like, we're permanent. We have 15,000 people in Chicago. We want Rahm to love our company, to help our company, and these programs to work at the local level, because this is our society. We all belong to it, and that's kind of what we do.
So I can think of no better place to end on that. Thank you very much, Jamie, for being here and what you do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Melody, thank you always, Mel. Good to see you. Thanks a lot. Very good.